um, leaders and lobby groups that have already weighing in on the Finance Bill 2023, which is essentially the promises that the government delivered that they really want to achieve. Good. Now, we start like this. I'm going to read for you some of the quotes of members of parliament from a section in the country where then the Kenya Kwanza government enjoys majority of support. And these are essentially members of parliament within the government who are speaking about the Finance Bill 2023. We'll go open like this. I've got this particular quote by Gathoni Wamuchomba, who's the Githunguri member of parliament, who's saying the bill is punitive and oppressive to the same hustler who gave us the mandate of representing him in government. That is this particular quote by Gathoni Wamuchomba, who's a Githunguri member of parliament. Now, here's the thing. Edward Muriu, Gatanga member of parliament, who's saying government must restore the lost trust of the public so that they get assurance that money collected will be put to good use. Fantastic. Now we end it like this. John Kagucha, who's a Mukurweni member of parliament, who says, I don't understand why Wamuchomba has decided to go that route, talking about that particular member of parliament, that is Gathoni Wamuchomba, who's saying that this bill is punitive and oppressive to the same hustler who gave us the mandate of representing him in government. John Kagucha is saying, I do not understand why she has decided to go that route. So you will see nobody essentially within that particular section of Kenya Kwanza leaders are essentially in 100% full support of the Finance Bill 2023. So now you do know that this particular bill is going to go back to Parliament, and all eyes then on these members of Parliament were speaking here about the split now that we're reading as regards this particular bill. Which way is it going to go? That is the question that we're asking this morning as we weigh in on the promises versus politics. Good. Let me introduce the panel that is joining us this morning. Again, I do have Callistus Wafula. How are you doing, sir?
Fine.
Happy to see you around. We also do have Paul. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good.
Fantastic.
Happy to see you again.
Good. Let me start with you, Mr. Mashara. It's a definite split you will see within the Kenya Kwanza government as to what this particular bill wants to achieve. On this other side, you have a president who said, I have to deliver the promises that are made to Kenyans. But then within the section of Kenya Kwanza government, there are members of parliament who are asking questions. Why are you going this route? So which way?
So one thing that Kenyans need to appreciate is that when we come to the representatives of the people being the leaders in the National Assembly, their role, as we have said previously, it is essentially three-pronged roles.
Yes.
One, they are supposed to represent the representation. Two, they are supposed to legislate. And they are also supposed to check and balance the operations of the government. What we are seeing now is the outcry that is with the citizens, the Wanjiko, the Omondi and Otieno, in terms of how difficult they are in appreciating the issues, the financial issues that are facing them. In Parliament, just like any other Parliament, people have different opinion and different expression on what the government intends to do. In any debate in Parliament, there is a presumption that the parliamentarians will argue it independent and as a representation of the people who sent them to the Parliament. So you will find that even when the people are on the same stream, be it Azimio, be it Kenya Kwanza, they may have different opinions because the people they are representing may have different views on the issues that are brought on the table. So the differences is not something that is not common, it's something that's common, and it is just a representation, it's just a semblance of what is on the ground.
Yes.
Because that is what the people send them to do. If they are unhappy with the bill, Whether they supported the government or not, they have the right to express themselves through their leader.
You like to think that this is a government agenda, Mr. Macharia.
Indeed, this is a government
agenda. When you are in the government, you should support the government.
I want to be clear.
Yes.
Being a government agenda doesn't mean even those who are in the government ought to support it without criticizing it. Because the role of the government, and in this case we are talking about the various arms of the government.
Yes.
This being the government agenda, in essence, is being driven by the leader of the majority. And being the government agenda, it is the proposition of the executive.
Yes.
Executive through the parliament needs that bill registered. The legislatures, no matter which side they come from, they have the duty to represent their people. So even when they are in the government or not, their legitimate call is to the people.
Yes.
So they are supposed to speak the mind of the people.
Yes.
Speak the pains of the people, whether you are in the government or you are not in the government.
For the government of the day,
yes,
what makes it easier for you to run your business is that you enjoy a majority support,
yes,
in the National House. So aren't we looking at it and then saying that all the members of parliament now, especially from the Mount Kenya region, who are questioning this particular bill, are essentially saying, we do not support you. So we're making it difficult for the government to run its business. You like to think that from where President William Ruto is coming from a point of good faith. I made promise to Kenyans, I gotta deliver. So I need that money to deliver. So if your member of parliament seated in the National House, waiting for that bill to come to the National House, and then here you are saying, I do not support it. What are you saying, Mr. Macharia? Aren't you saying I do not support the president? I do not support my government.
As I said,
yes,
the role is so distinct.
Yes.
The people in the National Assembly, they are not, the first responsibility, the first call of duty,
yes,
is to the people who elected them. The second call of duty,
yes,
is to the party that gave them a chance to go to the parliament. And the National Assembly is supposed to make laws. These laws are supposed to conform to the provisions of the Constitution,
yes,
to the provisions of any other policy that guides the operations. So even when, and this is what calls for this is the reasons why there is what we call the independence of the arms of the government.
Does that?
Even when the government, assume today,
yes,
and it has been in the past, where the government comes with unconstitutional law, because it just, by the sense that it enjoys the number,
yes,
it doesn't guarantee that that law should be passed.
Who is the government, Mr. Macharia?
The government is the people in the leadership.
Yes.
When we're talking about the government, it has various arms.
Does it? So when the president says, we are going to introduce this, you
yes,
like to think is referring to the government. The government is Kenya Kwanza, isn't it?
Indeed.
So when the government has a split on its policies, then you like to think that there's a problem, isn't it?
What then needs, of course, when you're talking about, there are some constitutional dictates and provisions,
yes,
that allows people to express their opinion, to positively criticize the government, even when they are in it. What the government needs to do is to streamline whatever is bringing to the House so
yes,
that it can garner the maximum support. That the government has said this is right,
yes,
doesn't mean that everyone should support it.
But when we say the government, that's the Kenya Kwanza government. I'm going to come back to you
yes,
on that, because there's a caveat on that.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we've seen happen again last week again. We do know that the UDA vice chair also resigned on the basis of that. He said, I do not understand why my party, which is essentially majority Kenya Kwanza government, has decided to go this route.
Precisely.
Taxation and over-taxation. But then, Mr. Macharia,
yes,
isn't that what we should start reading the problem? Callistus, I want to pull you into this conversation this morning, Mr. Wafula. Let me first start by asking, who is the government? When we say the government is introducing ABCD, who are we talking about?
We are talking about people who are in the leadership.
And in this case, the Kenya Kwanza government.
Yes.
So when we wake up this morning and we find that the members from the Kenya Kwanza government who are asking the president why he has decided to take this route, in fact, they're saying, well, this is not the Hasna narrative that essentially we ascended to power with. Yes. What are you reading in those statements?
What comes out clearly is that most of Kenyans, including those who are supporting the government, are uncomfortable.
Yes.
For the measures the government is taking.
Yes.
Extreme measures of raising money through an orthodox means. Because when you say you are forcing people to pay house levy, you have not consulted anybody. And that thing violates, infringes on the rights of people.
Yes.
Because you cannot slash my salary and I have not asked you to build a unit for me. I can tell Mr. President, because an idiot will tell him, if you want to raise revenue, you increase taxes. But a clever person will tell him, if you want to raise revenue, you reduce taxes so that you attract investors, and also you encourage compliance. Most of Kenyans who are running business, they are not paying taxes. They are unable to pay that taxes because the tax is too high. If you pay tax, you will not be able to run your business. So president should put in office people who understand what economy means, because you cannot raise a tax rate to increase revenue.
Yes.
And when you look at our production, the general national output, it is reducing each and every year. So what is the government putting in place to encourage industrialization? There is nothing that they are doing about industrialization. They are doing nothing about the infrastructure, because when you say your main agenda is building houses for Kenyans, I think that is misplaced priority. And when I was coming here at the studio, I read something, an open letter written by His Excellency Ruben Kikame.
Yes.
I think that is a genuine Kenyan whom I should laud on this national TV, because Kenya is lacking genuine people who can lead a liberation movement. We need to liberate ourselves from the hands of these bandits who are in the position of leadership. And when he has warned, Ruben Kikame has warned Mr. President against over-taxation, against implementing global IMF policies without, with total disregard to Kenyan state of affairs. He has also warned him not to force Kenyans, that he wants to slash their salaries and they are living in extreme poverty. So I think Ruben Kikame, what he has told Mr. President is that he is working with the people who are not genuine.
Yes.
When you listen to Kachakwa, he has openly said that Kenya Kwanza government is for the shareholders, people who voted for Kenya Kwanza government. And it is so unfortunate, because even those who supported Kenya Kwanza government are also facing the same problem others are facing.
Yes.
Who do not support William Ruto. So what I want to tell Mr. President is that whether you say this is a government of shareholders, the shareholders are not seeing the benefit of having you in office. So he needs to rethink. And I think the best way is that Kenyans to raise up and to fight against those people who are proposing extreme measures that affect our economy. You cannot say you want to slash my salary, you build a house for me. And that is not part of our problem. The problem facing Kenya, housing is not part of the problem we are facing.
He said he wants to use housing to solve an unemployment
problem. You cannot, because what Kenyans want now, one, they want food. Two, they want employment. Because most of graduates who have recently graduated from the university, they're just rotting in the house. So I'm telling you, if we want to help this country realize its economic achievements, he needs to encourage let me ask you, if you have a government land, if you have two government, one is building houses for the people, then the one is donating that public land to an investor,
Yes.
who is helping the country. Because this an investor will come and put an industry there.
Yes.
After putting a factory, you will be able to employ people. People will construct their houses. So housing is not our problem. In fact, we are living in good houses.
Pretty much. So, gentlemen, there's something that I want us to weigh in on this particular issue here, so that now we get the clear picture of exactly what's going on. This morning we said it is politics now versus the promises that the president essentially came into power with. We have to agree, Macharia, that our politics are also growing. You will heavily try to think that indeed for the very first time, Kenya is now becoming critical on the promises that are on the manifesto of the presidents who are coming up. I mean, if you look at the campaigns in 2022, you will say, well, indeed, majority of them were essentially written on the promises of the manifestos. Good. And I ask you this question. You have one UDA vice chair who's saying, well, man, we came on this, on the promise of a hustler government, a government that is essentially going to look at the pockets of the hustlers. Good. And is questioning that doctrine now when all of a sudden people are questioning, well, you see, you guys are heavily now on taxes. Good. Number two, now you have members of parliament from a place where you say it is almost 98% the Kenya Kwanza government. Members of parliament who themselves do not agree on that particular doctrine. So the question therefore becomes this. Is it not easy then to start saying that indeed this particular government overly promised, but now when it comes to governance, what they're doing right now is playing politics? And answer from this perspective. Macharia, you and I have been in this country for quite some time now. It has actually never been seen to the level of public participation that we've seen in a document leading to a budget. We've seen protests, and we're going to run that story next, leading to the tabling of that document in Parliament. What does that tell you about the feelings of the direction of this government, Mr. Macharia?
Of course, we appreciate, and indeed it's so clear that promises do not lead to the policies. And when this government came into power, there were so many promises that it gave to the people. But then the reality is hitting them, that these promises need implementation. And that's where the government comes in. You know, when the people are elected, the legitimate government has mandate to come up with measures that do not depart greatly from their promises.
Yes.
One of the promise was that they are going to lower the cost of living. The other promise was that at least Wanjiko, Mama Mboga, their fares will be given precedence. What we are seeing now is a complete departure from the promises. And this is the reason that this government has not indeed thought critically on how to address the promises they made. What they are doing, one thing, when the government is elected, it is the mandate of the government to raise revenue. It is the mandate of the government to deliver in terms of provision of the social services, in terms of the provisions of an enabling environment,
Yes.
in terms of operationalizing the policies that can invite the foreign investors. When this government came into power, we also that some of the subsidies were done away with. And now we are seeing, in essence, what the government is doing is trying to expand the tax base. The result of expanding the tax base, it is to increase the government revenue. How the government get funding is either through the taxes,
Yes.
through the grants, through the loans, and through the other avenues, through the rates that the people pay to the government. When the government over-relies on one side of the raising revenue and abandons the other, the citizens are the ones to suffer, because these are people who are raising revenue. They are paying taxes, they are paying other necessities. So what the government ought to do is to balance between raising revenue and burdening the people who are the tax bearers, or the people who are paying taxes. When the government says we cannot and will not borrow and still want to deliver, the fallback is they have to overburden the people so that they get more revenue. If the people are overburdened, the incentive to invest for them to get more income is also reduced. When we were here last time, we talked about how it is difficult for a Kenyan to work on an empty stomach. This Kenyan, you want them to pay taxes, yet the environment on operating their businesses is so stiff on them.
Yes.
Everything is being taxed. So their take home is so little. And then they are ought to buy the items that are also so expensive. So the government needs to balance. Of course, we all agree that the government needs to deliver. And this is what we call the welfare government. In discussing the natures of and the types of government, the welfare government is the one that tries to satisfy the welfare of the people. But even in doing that,
yes,
even introducing taxes, sometimes you find that some governments tax the rich to satisfy the poor. But then, what incentive are you giving to the rich that you're overtaxing? You know, the rich are the ones who are generating income. If you overtax them to introduce a policy, what incentive are you giving to the rich? And what motivation will the poor have in working hard to get rich? So it's a very delicate balance, and the government is really in a fix. Because it has to deliver, and it has for the government to deliver, it has to raise revenue. For the government to raise revenue, there are various avenues. What my advice would be, it should not overburden one avenue of raising revenue. If it is to increase taxes, then it should see how it should subsidize some of the basic commodities, so that even as much I'm getting, my take home is little, at least I can be able to afford food, I can be able to afford fuel, I can be able to afford unga and other necessities. If that cannot be done, then reduce on the taxes, that as much as my take home is small, I can be able to manage myself. But as much as the cost of items is high, the taxes are high, Kenyans are going to revolt. And one of the contentious issues, as we move on, is that when we were here last, we were talking about the rights of employees.
Mr. Macharia, I want you to take a tiny breather on that, because we're going to talk about that once we come from this break, because it's indeed important then for us to get perspective. I want us to go for this tiny breather. Once we come back then, it's essentially going to pick on that point, because the employers and civil service unions, by the way, they've promised they're going to the street. And this week, yesterday, to be specific, we've seen some of them on the street. We're going to come back on that story. Mr. Macharia and Mr. Wafula are right here as we delve into this particular issue. The tight balance between now playing politics and delivering on those promises.